Welcome to PlayPianoTODAY.com. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at learning to develop right-hand solo lines on the keyboard. This is one of those lessons that you can learn in 5 or 10 minutes and then practice for 25 years. I'm not exaggerating. I remember I was taught this very technique from a man by the name of Ron Hoops, one of my jazz instructors back in college, and he literally showed it to me in 5 minutes. And I've been working on it ever since. I feel like I'm starting to get a handle on it, but this is one of those things you can work on for the rest of your life and just get better and better. Specifically, we're looking at how to develop right-hand solo lines on the keyboard. And it really doesn't matter what style you're playing, whether you're playing rock or jazz or rhythm and blues or country or pop, it doesn't matter. Your right hand has got to be able to come up with interesting solo lines. And here's what Ron taught me, and this is what I'm going to teach to you today in maybe 10, 12 minutes. We're going to take a few chords, simple chords, and then I'm going to show you how to pick notes from those chords at a very slow pace. And you can just simply pick out lines. And when you're just starting out on this technique, sometimes it doesn't sound really musical right away. It'll sound kind of like you're on a pogo stick on the piano at first. But as we go through the lesson, you're going to see how to speed those lines up until they sound fluent, until they sound smooth. And then the next big step is to learn how to pick notes outside of the chords so that your melodies become more interesting. Finally, I'll show you how to mix it up, taking slow lines, fast lines, notes within the chords, notes outside of the chords, just to come up with fantastic sounding melodies or solo lines that you can create on the spot. So let's get to it. In this lesson, I'm going to use 4 chords from one of my favorite all-time songs. Let me play through those 4 chords a couple times and just kind of play over the top of them. And there's extra points if you can recognize what song this is. Do you recognize the chords from that song? I know I took a lot of liberties with the melody, but that is one of my all-time favorite tunes. The 4 chords used in this song are G major, G, B, and D, B major, B, D sharp, and F sharp, C major, C, E, and G, and A major, A, C sharp, and E. Now, if we were playing this like in a band and they said, okay, keyboard man, take a solo and play through those chords a couple times, I might play a solo something like this. Now, even though that solo was based on those 4 simple chords, you notice both my hands were playing all over the keyboard. But let's focus just on the right hand for a second. How do you get all those notes out of those 4 simple chords? How do you learn to do solo lines with your right hand? Well, the process itself is pretty simple, but it's just a matter of taking the steps. So let me walk you through it. With my left hand, I'm simply going to play just those chords, G, B, C, and A major. The process is really simple. You start by using just the notes taken from these chords, and you play 1 note for every 2 beats, like this. 2, 1, 2, 1. And you notice I'm just using notes from these chords. 1, 2, 1. Here's the A chord. 2. Here's G again. Here comes B. 2, 1, 2. C. Sometimes I like to make big leaps like this, even though I'm just using notes from these chords. If you make a big jump like that, G, let me show you some bigger leaps now. Here's B, big jump, C. This is the real simple way to start. And we're going to do this in 2 stages. First, I'm going to show you how to speed it up, and then I'll show you how to use notes outside of the chords to make your melodies more interesting. So let's go the next step, learning to play 1 note now for every beat, so the melodies that I pick are going to be twice as fast. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Here's C, 2, 4, A, 2, 3. Back to G, 1, 2. Just the notes from each one of those chords. You could actually do this for hours. It's a really good study because you've got to restrict yourself to the notes from the chords down there and just do 1 note per beat. And every once in a while, instead of just playing the notes in a row like they show up in the chords, make some jumps like this. That helps to make your melodies more interesting. Now, just watching this, you may say, big deal. How hard can that be? 1 note per beat in simple chords? I would encourage you just to jump on the keyboard and give it a shot. Not to discourage you, but this can really be challenging, especially if you pick chords that are not real similar, like C and A and B and G in this example. This is really something, I know I showed it to you in seconds here, but you can literally sit down for days and just practice this until your hands get fluent at finding those notes quickly. And then just about the time you get comfortable with that, it's time to shift into overdrive and go the next step. Now it's 2 notes for every beat. Now, coming up soon in this lesson, we're going to use notes that are not within the chords, and that's where it really gets interesting. But right now, we're just doing notes that come from the chords, and we're doing 2 notes for every beat. On top of it all, you're trying to throw in some bigger leaps so that your melodies get more interesting. Throw in some big leaps once in a while. Here's an example of something that you might come up with at this point. Even at this point, when we're just doing notes from the chords, sometimes just that is something to work on for hours or weeks or months until you can really get fluent just playing notes from the chords. Now, it doesn't really yet sound like a musical solo. It sounds more like maybe a robot, but it's a great pathway to learning to get just completely free with your right hand. The next step is to start using something called passing tones. Passing tones are super cool. They do exactly what their name implies. They pass between chords. For instance, going between G and B major, I can play a G and a B in my right hand. Pretty simple. Or I can throw a passing tone in between them. Watch this. You see that A? All of a sudden, your ear hears that nice melody. And melodies are the strongest force in music, much stronger than harmonies. Harmonies support melodies. That is a cardinal rule of music. You'll find out. That's why your ear hears the melody of someone singing and the whole band is supporting the singer. And that's why the band hates the singer. No, that's not true. Okay, but this passing tone becomes powerful because it's a melody. It's a tiny little melody that your ear hears. And look at this. That A passing tone, it didn't fit in with the G or the B chord, did it? It doesn't show up anywhere. Now, if you're a music theory buff, you're going to say, wait a minute. That A does show up within G. If you analyze the full higher extensions, if you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, well, the A is the 9th of G. But because it's being used in the context of a melody, and melody trumps harmony, all of a sudden, instead of a harmonic note, it's now a passing note. So how do I come up with it? Very simply, if I was analyzing the harmony, I could say, okay, I'll play the 9th or the 11th or the 13th of the chord or any of those higher extensions. Or I could simply say, what sounds good between G and B? Well, that sounds good. And again, the melody is the paramount, most important thing. So, because good melodies cannot be built by analyzing chords, you've got to be willing to experiment and find passing tones that sound good to you. Maybe you like this passing tone, or even this. But if you want to become a player that people love to listen to, you've got to be willing to experiment and find your own passing tone melodies. Now I'm going between the chords B and C. Okay, keep going. C to A. Now, I don't mean to belabor this point, but it's very true. There's no way to come up with memorable melodies mathematically or with music theory. Melodies are creative. They're outside the box. You cannot come up with melodies by analyzing, at least not good ones. You can come up with robotic melodies with notes from the chord, but you can't skip this step. You have to learn to experiment and find passing tones outside of the chord, and your melodies will be beautiful and people will want to listen to them. So I'll do this now. I'm going to go all the way through those 4 chords and throw passing tones in there, and I think I'll go ahead and start real simply, 1 note for every 2 beats. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Here's 2 passing tones in a row. Look at that. 3 in a row. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Ooh, there's a nice jazz passing tone. 1, 2, 1. Sometimes your passing tones may seem a little ugly like this until they resolve. Did you hear that? Here's another one. I'll do it again. Ugly passing tone, it resolves, and it's actually has some depth to it. It's nice, has a little dissonance to it. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sometimes you can repeat notes. Listen to that, and it resolves. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now let's go to 1 note per beat. This time I'm really going to throw in some dissonant or some notes that really fight some passing tones, but I'll always resolve them. So if I hit something like this, I'll resolve it like this, right? Or like this, we'll resolve to here. Okay, so your passing tones can land on the chord and be really nice and ugly, especially if you get into some jazz stuff. But if you resolve it, and especially if you do it twice, people will think you meant to do it. So let's go. Here we go. 1 note for every beat. All right. You're on your way to creating interesting solos with your right hand. Oh, I really took that one pretty far, but I resolved it so it made sense musically. You'd be amazed how hard this is to do at first, but it's so good to do hour by hour, because you really start hearing the melodies in your head before you play them. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. It's still robotic at this point just because I'm marching, march, 1 note per quarter note. But this is absolutely the place to start. Spend the time and don't skip this, because although I said it before, it bears repeating. You'll start hearing the notes in your mind before you play them on the keyboard. I remember when my teacher, Ron Hoops, told me that back a few years ago. He said, do these quarter notes. Doesn't matter what chords you do it over. You can do this over any song, but pick just a few chords so you don't drive yourself nuts. Maybe 4 chords or 8 chords in a row, but make this a part of your practice routine. Go through real slow to begin with. 1 note for every 2 beats, and then 1 note per beat, like you saw me do, and then move it up. Once you get really comfortable, move to 2 notes for every beat so you're playing 8th notes. Spend the hours doing that. Eventually, like I said, once it becomes your turn to solo, you'll be able to hear those notes before they come out of your fingers on the keyboard. This is a doable thing. So what's next? Okay, you won't always play straight 8th notes or straight quarter notes. You're going to mix it up. So let me give you an example now. I'm going to play the same chords again. This time I'll play little phrases that have some 8th notes and some phrases that are a little slower, some that are quicker, just to mix it up. But I've gotten really comfortable with playing all these lines over these chords. Here's an example of that. All chord tones and passing tones. The next step now is to start looking at the left hand. As the right hand is doing all its solos, your left hand needs to be able to complement those right hand lines because they sound so good. You could go on just playing the simple chords in the left hand like I was doing, but there's really so much more in music. Let me play the same 4 chords again, soloing with my right hand with the techniques we studied today. And in my left hand, I'm going to break away from those simple chords. I'm going to stretch out into some fat jazz comp chords. Comp is short for complementary, meaning it complements the solo. This is what that would sound like. To check out those left-hand blues techniques, how to jazz up those left-hand chords, check out our blues course. You can find it at PlayPianoTODAY.com/blues. My name is David Sprunger. I hope you enjoyed this lesson as much as I did today. You know what to do now. Go practice.